Spider-Man gets an upgrade. This is your look at the Hot Toys Spider-Man Spider Armor Mark IV suits. Developed by Peter Parker at Parker Industries, the Spider Armor Mark IV suit is a high-tech variation of the classic red and blue costume with a distinct glowing spider insignia. Made of metallic liquid nanotechnology, the advanced armor is capable of absorbing all damages, which renders Spider-Man completely impervious to harm in the critically acclaimed video game Marvel's Spider-Man. Now, before we get a closer look at the Spider-Man Spider Armor Mark IV suit, let's first figure out how tall the figure stands. I'm going to go ahead and clock him in reading at 11.9 inches in height, so he's about 12 inches almost. Switching that to centimeters, then you're looking at the figure standing 30.4 centimeters tall. To show you how he stacks up with another Spider-Man, we'll just move him over for the time being and bring in the Spider-Man Homecoming Spider-Man. There's definitely no disputing it. The Spider-Man Mark IV suit is a much taller looking Spider-Man, and he might seem a little bit bigger and broader than the Spider-Man Homecoming Spider-Man. Now, obviously, these are from two different universes, so to speak, so this one is, like I said, it's a little bit taller, it is a little bit bigger, and certainly when it comes to his costume, the Mark IV costume is a lot shinier as well than the previously looked at Spider-Man Homecoming release. Let's talk about the accessories that come included with the figure, and we always seem to start with display stands, so we'll start our review there. The display stand that comes included with the Mark IV suit, as you can see, is a hexagonal display stand with a nice shiny finish. On the top, you've got Marvel Spider-Man with the Spider-Man logo taken from the video game, and on the front, you've got Spider Armor Mark IV. Really like the way that they've done that. They seem to have gone away, it seems, from the silver placard. I see less and less figures actually going that route. You'll also see on the top there is the traditional adjustable neck. This, of course, is a wireframe neck, so you can adjust and manipulate that depending on how you want to display Spidey for yourself. But oh no, there's one other thing that this display stand also has. You'll see on the sides here, there are all these little ports. What are these ports for? Well, I'll talk about that in a second. 4 ports on either side, well, 4 ports all the way around, and there's an on and off switch also located on the back as well. So, of course, all of that has something to do with a little bit of an expansion that you can add on to the existing stand that we're currently looking at. So check this out. This is pretty cool. We already had a look at the hexagonal display stand, but this particular Spider-Man comes with also additions. You'll start first with the base. Now, this is an additional extension piece that will go underneath, and this will attach to this. Before you actually attach it, I want to show you that underneath the base, there's a battery cover. 3 AAA batteries are required to do all the following things that we're going to be looking at shortly, but you will want to put in your 3 AAA batteries from there. On the back, you've got your on and off switch. You've got on 1, on 2. On 1 works with the batteries. On 2 works with the power supply that's going to plug into the side. Yes, they did include a power supply, but it's actually just a USB cable. So you will still need a plug adapter, or you can attach it to anything that's USB enabled, like a hub or like a laptop, for example. So when you are switching this on, if you do put the batteries in the compartment and you switch it to on 2, it's going to deliver nothing. Just know that switching it to on 2 works only when you've attached the AC power supply plugged into the port on the side. That being said, let's go ahead and switch this to off for the time being. And what we will want to do is the bottom end of it, you'll see that there's like a little track. There's a groove, a space from the edge to the inside. And that actually attaches to these, not well, but it attaches to these little prongs here. Before we actually do that, I want to show you guys the archways. He comes with these 2 arches that go over top and attach to the sides of the display stand. When we looked at this base, you saw that there's these little open areas here, these little canals. Well, these archways will sit inside of that. The archways are only done really with styrofoam, so they feel generally quite cheap and light when you feel them in your hand. All it really is just styrofoam packing inside, and then cardboard done over top of it. They're fairly detailed, so I'll give it credit to that. You'll see Silver Stable International, for example. And overall, like, even though it's cardboard, I think it's done pretty good. You see there's all these embedded lights inside the inside of the archways, and that's the case actually on both. You'll also see there's 2 cables. You saw it on this side, there's the other side right there, and these will attach to the base. So what we will want to do first is we are going to take these first and feed them through. Now there's a hole on the inside. Hello, hi Spider-Man, I can see you. You're going to go ahead and take the cord, you're going to feed it straight through. Depending on how curved those cables are, sometimes one is a little bit easier than the other, sometimes they're both difficult. But do your best to feed it through. It helps, I find, to put your finger on the back side here, because if not, that cable will drop straight through. And once it's straight through on the one side, then just affix it into that canal. And it's pretty stable. It's not going anywhere. Do the exact same thing on the other side. Take again that cable, feed it through the hole, and just sort of guide it, send it on its journey until it goes all the way straight through the other side. The one thing you will want to avoid doing is making sure that the cables, the wires, are not crimped. Once that's in place, yes, it's generally a little on a flimsy contraption, but from there you're going to go ahead and decide which way you want to display this. Now, if you look at the base, the front says, of course, Spyder Armor. This will dictate, I'm sure, which way you want to display it. If you are somebody that likes to have the archways facing backward, so the figures on the front, the archways are in the back, you will then attach it to the ports located on the back of the cable, right here, or on the back of the base. If you do want to, say, for example, display it so the archways are facing this way, then what you will want to do is you'll want to attach them to these ports, this one here and this one right here. I kind of actually like the idea of displaying him with the archways, I think, facing backward. But you can do either or. It's entirely up to you. What you will want to do, though, is you'll want to feed this straight through. And you'll attach it, of course, to the ports located on the back. Feed it on one side. And don't put it in place just yet. Go ahead and feed it on the other side. And make sure that they're securely plugged in place. Once that's in place, just make sure that the cables are back where they are. You really don't want to be pushing and pinching those wires. Just make sure they're fed all the way back. And just with a little bit of a push, you can kind of get that base locked in. It's not stable enough that you would want to be picking it up from the base itself, but it's more than enough to keep it in place. Now again, I only have this currently on battery, so what I'll do is I'll switch this to on, and what you'll get is a nice illuminated purple LED light. I'm doing my best to not shine that on you guys, but you can at least see. And it's not until actually you take Spider-Man and you put him in front of it, or if you had it the opposite way as well, if you have the light source shining on Spider-Man, and hopefully you guys can see here in the video, boy, does it ever do a great job of illuminating this additional kind of purple, kind of like a bee comb effect all across his body. I mean, based on the type of coloring and material that they use, the light really does a great job of illuminating. You may find actually more success of displaying it this way, even though I kind of like the archways facing backwards. When you have it facing this way, let's do my best to not drop it. When you have it this way, I find the light is more directly shone on Spider-Man. You can see a lot more of it there on his costume. That's really cool, especially when it comes to his face. Again, you can see how that illuminates all across his head. It looks like his costume is being scanned, and I think that's really neat. Running through the rest of Spidey's accessories, fans of the Hot Toy Spider-Man figures will probably find many of these accessories to be rather familiar, and yet we'll still go through it just to show you guys everything. You get still the token tray of webs. This doesn't change at all with all the Spider-Man. We just recently had a look at the stealth suit Spider-Man, and it came in fact with the exact same tray. So by now you probably have a whole ton of these. They vary in length, they vary in shape. This is just a straight out long web that you can attach into his hand. He also comes what I consider to be the Q-tip webs. I always jokingly say that because it reminds me of a Q-tip. He gets a couple of those, as you can see right there, all done in clear plastic. He does also come with the longer web, which as you can see is bent on the end. And by the way, all of these webs can also support and attach to the funnel web. Yes, you do get the funnel suction attached web, and this just plugs into place the exact same way. Again, I know everybody who's been collecting these Spider-Mans by now are so used to seeing these webs, not much really does get changed here. But I always appreciate the fact that you do get stuff like this. Even if, again, we see it so happen so often at times with all of these Spider-Man releases. We'll move those to the side. He also comes included with the web that attaches to either side of his hand. So for example, if you have like this web hand, you'll see there's holes on either side. And what it does is you just take this, fit it in on one side, and then do your best to fit it in on the other side as well. Now with this one, I find these ones are a little harder to get in there. I feel like almost the peg hole isn't properly the right size, but just fit that in on the one side. You'll twist, you'll squeak, you'll creak, and then take the other side and attach it like that. And you've got yourself like Spider-Man with a little bit of additional webbing going for him. Again, nothing really new to report here. These are the exact same webs that we see with the other Spider-Man figure releases in the past. Just be careful on this one, because I find I don't really like to pry this any more than I really have to. Go ahead and just pull that off, and then we'll just go ahead and put those to the side. Seeing as we already technically are looking at his hands, let's have a look at those hands right now. He comes with a couple of specifically designed web-holding hands, or thumbs-up hands. They're not really thumbs-up hands. They're really intended for holding his web. Again, you've got holes on both sides, the top straight through to the bottom, and you'll feed your web straight through like that. He does also come with a pair of closed fists. Not the most interesting thing, admittingly, for Spider-Man Hot Toys. I don't think anybody really would be displaying their Spider-Man with closed fists. There may be people out there that like to display their Spider-Man with closed fists. I certainly am not one of those people. He does also come with a couple of wall-holding hands, or web-clinging hands, I guess, if you want to have them stuck to the side of a wall. Of course, this is good if he's going to be scaling up the side of a building, ideally suited for that. I really like the detailing on all of these hands. This metallic red that they use very much reminds me of an Iron Man suit, actually, one of the Mark Iron Man suits. Very much that same sort of cranberry metallic red. So he gets those. And then, of course, no Spider-Man would be complete without a couple of web-shooting hands, and he comes with a pair of those as well. Same idea, same design, same color. Nice metallic red that they used for those. So we'll go ahead and put those to the side as well. The only thing that's really not considered Spider-Man extensions, like his hands, his eyes, for example, which we'll look at in a second. The only thing that he, other than that, comes included with is, of course, the Spyder Drone. If you did pick up the Advanced Suit Spider-Man, this is pretty much the exact same design. The other game Spider-Man that we had a look at before, the Spyder Drone, is the exact same. There's nothing different between this and the other one. It's still nicely colored, though. I like the design that they incorporated into it, with, as you can see, then the sunken-in grooves for the webbing and the various eyes, the 4 on the front. Again, I really like the design of the Spyder Drone. Even though, again, we've gotten this released before, always nice to see that we get something like this included. And then rounding out the rest of this, you get yourself some Spider pegs. I don't know why I felt the need to add Spider on the front of that, but it's just a couple of additional pegs that can go into the forearm sockets of Spider-Man's arms. Good if you break a couple. Good as well if you have those stubborn pegs that don't want to free themselves from the hands. You have then a couple of other ones you can actually go with as well. The last of his accessories just involve actually looking at his head sculpt, which I know for this time being we have not spent a lot of time, nearly enough time to really look at Spider-Man's eyes. But he does also come with a couple of removable eyes. Just very carefully, you don't have to apply very much pressure at all. He comes with a couple of variations. More slitted eyes, if you prefer your Spider-Man design to look like this. And we can also go ahead very carefully. There we go. I find actually it helps if you just take the top corner of the eye and sort of slide it down. It's more than enough. It catches on just enough, but there you go. If you pull it down just a little bit, you will want to be careful of it. Just lift that right off. And he also comes with some kind of medium eyes. So let me go ahead and bring in the starting eye so you guys can see the difference between the two. More of a slit, slightly medium, and the larger full-scaled eye are all the things that come included with the figure. Seeing as I like the larger eyes, we're going to go ahead and stick with that for the rest of this review. One thing I'm sure very apparent when you look at the eyes is the fact that they did add the additional airbrushing of what I could best describe as like a turquoise blue. Very different than the traditional white eyes that we normally expect to see on Spider-Man, and it works really well on this figure. When it comes to, of course, the head sculpt, one thing you'll see as well is the fact that the head is plastic. It is a different material, of course, than the material that they used for the rest of his costume, where here, I don't know what I would describe this as. It's almost like a wetsuit material. It's very slick to the touch, and you can see that honeycomb texturing that they did to the surface of it that then illuminates when you've got the light shining directly on it. I'm not so much bothered by the fact that the head sculpt is plastic and the rest of the body isn't. I had a problem when it came to the Iron Spyder when we had a look at that one before, because I just didn't find it worked well for the figure. And yet I find myself saying the opposite thing when it comes to the Mark IV suit. The plastic head doesn't really bother me at all, and it may have something more to do with the fact that when you're looking at the costume has a general sheen to it, the same way the plastic head has a sheen to it. If you're using a fabric that's more matte to look at, and then you're using a plastic head, then I think I have a bigger problem with that, because one shines the light a little bit different than the other. Because both things are shiny, the coloring also is close enough too that I don't find when I'm looking at it, I feel like I'm looking at two different things. Yes, if you really stare at it, you know it's a plastic head and the rest of the body isn't, but it's close enough that it doesn't bother me really. As for the rest of the body, of course, we've already had a closer look at it when we were shining the light on it, but let's get a closer look still. I don't know if hopefully the light is catching it or not, but all right, there we go, on the arm, there's all this nice additional honeycomb effect that they've added to the skin of the red. It's not there in the blue, but the blue does its good enough job on its own of adding some additional much-needed texturing. Now, I have some difficulty with this figure, not so much on this one arm. You can see the seam is pretty clean on this side, goes all the way up the middle, all the way across the arms, and it doesn't have any real visible issues. However, when you look at this arm right here, I find the seam is slightly more rougher. It sticks out a little more a couple of times here, and it sticks out especially here when we're looking at the under of the arm. You can see, yeah, you can see right there. See, it's got these little couple of bumps sticking up. I don't really know what I would do to fix that. I mean, it's not glaring enough that looking at it, it's going to drive me crazy. But it still bothers me the fact that that seam is a little bit more, like I said, it looks like it's sticking up just a little bit more on the inside of his torso, and certainly on the underneath of his arms as well. But the coloring is very vibrant on this one. I really like the design of it. Of course, you got the Spyder emblem that's a little bit more drastically changed than the traditional Spider-Man emblem, with the more exaggerated legs, all outlined nicely in blue. This section also here, this area of webbing, also gets some additional of that blue coloring, where the rest of the webbing is all more so just black. But again, when you've got the light hitting that, boy, does that ever do a great job of showing that honeycomb effect that they added to the surface of his costume. Let's go ahead and spin around to the back of the costume. Now we've got, again, a traditional looking Spyder emblem, slightly different from what we're normally used to seeing. Notably is the fact that it's got this one center disc that sticks out from the rest of his costume. And then, of course, you've got the 8 spider legs sticking it from there. Again, you've got some really stunning looking detailing that they did to this costume. I can't even imagine how much it would be involved to produce this material from scratch, but I'm really happy that they went the route that they did. When you have certain light hitting it, boy, does it ever reflect that light rather nicely. It almost seems like it's glowing when you stare at it. Now, when you get a little bit further down on Spider-Man's legs, you have the additional higher areas of the red. Normally, of course, the boots would stop right here. But on this design of the Mark IV suit, you can see that the boot goes further past the knee, only on the one side of the leg. We're going to talk a little bit about the posability, obviously, in a second, but when you look at, of course, the bottoms of the bottoms of his feet are plastic, and then, of course, they've been attached to the fabric in the tops of his feet. And again, generally, they meld pretty good. It doesn't bother me at all. I do notice, though, that the feet, I don't know if it's just my eyes playing tricks on me, but they seem like they're slightly curved. They don't seem like they're perfectly flat. Other people, I'm sure, will be asking, what does web shooters look like? Let's have a look at those right now. Again, some really nice detailing on such a small thing. Something so small you would almost not even be able to see it. But you can see very nicely painted with the silver on the end of it, some additional black around it. Very, very nice the way that turned out. And like the head, of course, when it comes to the hands are also made of plastic. But again, when you're looking at it, the plastic doesn't bother me because it has that almost same reflective nature as the rest of his costume. It seems like it's almost the same material when obviously we know it's not. Let's go through the articulation on the Spyder armor. His head rotates all the way around. I will say, though, when you are rotating the head, just be careful that you're not putting your fingers against his eyes. I've already had this happen a couple of times where when I went to shift the head, I put pressure on the side of the eye and the eye started to dislodge itself. When you are rotating the head, kind of keep it to more the top of his temple and do the rotation that way. The head hinges up, the head hinges down, and you can also get it in a slight pivot back and forth. Not too much there. As for the arms hinge out almost at a 90-degree angle bend. Again, when it comes to these figures, every single time you move it, you hear really the ratcheted joints. And I'm really glad that they're using ratcheted joints when it comes to these figures, because it feels like when I'm moving the arm, I feel like there's a little bit more of stable clicking. I would rather clicking knowing that I'm hitting a point, hitting a point, hitting a point, than not having a ratcheted joint and then not knowing what allowances I had when it came to moving the arms. Of course, one allowance that you will want to be keeping in consideration is when you are moving the arms out, you're going to also be pulling a very tight pull on the inner seam of the costume. You will want to be careful of that. But the arms do move forward, they do move back. He has a swivel on the top bicep section of his arm. He has a double hinged elbow. Now, obviously, one thing you're probably going to be asking yourself is, I know with Spider-Man figures like this, when it comes to this type of material, would you long-term display your figures like this? Depending on who you talk to, I am from the school, I generally don't like to keep Spider-Man with permanent poses. For the time that I've had the figure and I've had a chance to kind of play around with it, I haven't noticed too much of a residual crease. I mean, from the time that I just bent the arm right now, you can sort of see I've got a little bit of it starting. Prior to this review, I've just sort of been bending the arm back and forth and just moving it around this way. I don't know myself if I would do long-term of keeping it permanently posed like this, for example. Fabric is one thing, but when you get to this type of material, I feel personally, as my own personal opinion, I feel like if you have the arm bent too long for too long of a period of time, I feel like you're going to be permanently leaving those wrinkles behind. Just my own personal preference. Hands rotate all the way around, whatever hand you decide to display him with. They also move back and forth because there is a hinge joint working there after all. He has an upper torso ball joint, a little on the tighter side because, of course, he's underneath all this costume. Legs split out again with a nice ratcheted joint. You can move them forward, you can move them back. He has a swivel on the top cut of the thigh, double hinge on the knee. When it comes to, of course, his feet, move them back and forth, in and out, and he also does have toe articulation. Going back to those flat feet we were looking at before, they're actually sectional, so you can actually bend those toes back and forth. The only thing, again, that bothers me about this is where they've put that seam line, or where they put actually that divide on the bottom of his feet. I don't know if it's going to start developing a crack right there. Right there. It hasn't obviously happened yet because it's a new figure, but long-term is always the thing we really want to be looking at. Would long-term start creating a little crease line right there? That's an answer I really don't actually know. But overall, like a good, really solid-looking Spider-Man. I really like the way that this one turned out. He keeps sort of to the idea of that traditional red and blue costume that I really liked about Spider-Man in the first place, but gives him the additional accents of the metallic blue and the red. Of course, coupled with the fact that he does have the wider emblem on the front of his chest, and he does have the Archway display stand that you can display with the figure, really adds up to a decent looking Spider-Man. I'm really glad to now add to my collection. When it comes time to displaying my Spider-Man Hot Toys figures, I tend to put them in more museum poses. Part of it has something to do with I just don't have the space. If I had more space, and I would be somebody like most collectors that have the open area where you can put them in dynamic poses, absolutely, I would sign up for that. But half the time, most of my figures are relegated to detolfs, and I just can't afford to put them in any crazy looking poses. Spider-Man as well, you got to be careful with. Some of his costumes have been pretty lenient when it comes to when you put them in poses, you're not worrying about damaging the costumes. Like the Amazing Spider-Man 2 costume Spider-Man, or even the Homecoming Spider-Man. Those are fabric costumes, and I think they work a little bit more user-friendly when it comes to posing them and putting them in dynamic poses. When it comes to figures like this, or the Advanced suit, or the Iron Spider suit that we looked at before, because it's using a type of material that I feel is more... It's left more to wrinkling, I feel, if you're putting them in long-term poses. It's probably one of the other reasons why, when it comes to this particular Spider-Man, I'm not going to be putting him in any crazy dynamic poses, just because I don't want to damage that costume. If people have done that, I've seen lots of talented, quote-unquote, posers out there that like to put their Spider-Man in crazy-looking poses. And all the power to you. If you're not bothered by the fact it may leave wrinkles, and I've seen some cases where people say, I've had this figure posed for months, and the wrinkles haven't stayed. They've gone away. And again, that's always the jeopardizing thing when it comes to this type of style of costume. The material that they used is good and it looks great, especially when you got light shining on it. But again, I feel like it's something that would be jeopardized if I'm going to be putting him in any crazy looking poses. One great thing that works favoring the Mark IV suit is he does have this Archway light up display. You can simply remove the hexagonal stand from the center and just take these off completely if you want to. But I kind of think it adds a little bit of extra something to him as well. The fact that it illuminates that purple light against the surface of his fabric. You get to see those all little honeycomb patterning that they did to the costume. And that looks really neat. Again, it's going to boil down to space and how much I have of it available. But if I have this space available, I wouldn't mind displaying Spider-Man the Mark IV suit looking like this, with the pillars and those archways shining down on him. A nice touch also on Hot Toys' part was not only just relying on batteries, because obviously long-term use, those batteries aren't going to last very long at all, but giving you also that USB port that you could plug into a USB-enabled device or a hub, for example. You could have these lights shining all the time. And that sounds great. And it looks great, especially when you got a collection room slightly low lit. And you can really see the full effect of those lights shining on Spider-Man's costume. Let me know down below in the comments section what you guys think of the Spider-Man Spider Armor Mark IV suit. I picked this up currently from a website that's under construction, but as soon as that website is up and running, good to go, I'll provide the link down below in the video description where you guys can pick up these ones for yourself a little bit earlier than what they're normally slated to release in North America. Also, your video question for today is, what's your favorite Spider-Man costume? I kind of like this one because it's got that traditional looking classic Spidey costume, even though technically we are going to be still getting a classic Spider-Man costume, which I'm really looking forward to getting as well. But what is your favorite Spider-Man costume? Let me know down below in the comments section. If you're also new to the channel, and you're enjoying all the content you're seeing here on a regular basis, make sure you hit your subscribe button down below. Make sure you hit the bell notification, and make sure you come back to this channel Monday to Friday, 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's when new videos will be popping up. And above and beyond all the other things that we normally look at on this channel, there's going to be a lot more early reviews slated to come to this channel, so make sure you keep your peepers peeled. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.